The morning air was still cool when old Mrs. Chen pushed her wooden cart through the empty streets. Her back hurt from yesterday's long hours, but she didn't slow down. She never did. By the time other vendors arrived at Riverside Market, she was already there, arranging her herbs in neat little bundles on her small stall. 72 years old, and every single day felt harder than the last. Her fingers didn't move like they used to. Sometimes she had to stop and flex them just to get the stiffness out. Her eyes weren't what they once were either. She had to hold things close now, squinting to see the fresh leaves from the wilted ones. But none of that mattered. Not really. What mattered was sitting 3 blocks away in a small rented room, probably still sleeping with his schoolbook scattered around him. Her grandson. Her everything. The boy who called her grandma and made her feel like life still had purpose. Mrs. Chen had been selling herbs at this same corner for 15 years now. She knew every crack in the pavement, every regular customer, every other vendor who set up nearby. They all knew her story too. How she'd raised the boy since he was barely 3 years old. How his parents died in that terrible factory accident. How she refused to let anyone take him away to an orphanage. "I'm his family," she had told the social workers back then. "I'll manage," and somehow she did. The income from selling herbs wasn't much. On a good day, she might make $20. On a bad day, maybe 8 or 10. Most people didn't understand how valuable fresh herbs were. They'd haggle over 50 cents, not knowing that 50 cents meant something to her. It meant half a meal. It meant a pencil for her grandson. It meant another day of keeping him in school, because that's where every single dollar went. School fees, books, uniforms, bus fare, food for his lunchbox. She calculated everything down to the last cent. Other vendors would see her eating the same plain rice for lunch every day and shake their heads. Mrs. Wong, who sold vegetables 2 stalls down, often came by in the evenings. "Sister Chen, you're too thin," she'd say, placing some bok choy or carrots on her counter. "Take these. They won't sell tomorrow anyway." Mrs. Chen would protest, but Mrs. Wong always insisted. There were others too. Mr. Tan with his fruit stand sometimes left her a bruised apple or 2. The lady who sold dried fish would slip her a small packet when business was slow. "We look out for each other here," they'd say. But they all knew the truth. Mrs. Chen was struggling more than most. And she was too proud to ask for help. Her grandson David was 16 now. Smart as a whip, his teacher said. Always top of his class. Always respectful and hardworking. He had his mother's eyes and his father's quiet determination. When Mrs. Chen looked at him, she saw them both, and her heart would ache with memories. David didn't know how hard things really were. She made sure of that. He thought his grandmother ate before he came home from school. He didn't know she often survived on just tea and whatever the other vendors shared with her. He didn't know that the medicine she claimed to take for her joint pain was actually something she couldn't afford anymore. He didn't know she'd sold her late husband's watch and her own wedding ring years ago. All he knew was that Grandma woke up early, went to the market, and came home tired but always with a smile. Always asking about his day, always interested in what he learned, always reminding him that education was the key to everything. "Study hard," she'd tell him every single night. "Make something of yourself. Don't end up like me, working with bent back and tired hands." But she said it with love, never with bitterness. The market was starting to get busy now. Morning customers were arriving, looking for fresh ingredients for their cooking. Mrs. Chen straightened up her display, making sure everything looked appealing. She'd learned over the years how to arrange things just right. The bright green basil in front, the fragrant cilantro beside it, the medicinal herbs in the back labeled with small handwritten signs explaining their uses. She knew her herbs, not from books or school, but from her own grandmother who'd taught her decades ago in their village. Which leaves helped with fever, which roots eased stomach pain, which flowers made good tea for sleep. All that old knowledge passed down through generations, now helping her survive in the city. A young mother approached with a baby on her hip. "Auntie, do you have something for colic? My baby cries all night." Mrs. Chen's face softened. She reached for a particular herb, wrapped it carefully, and explained how to prepare it. "Boil it gently for 10 minutes. Let it cool. Give the baby just a little bit mixed with milk. Not too much." The woman paid and thanked her. Mrs. Chen watched her go, remembering when she'd held David as a baby, trying to soothe his cries after losing his parents. Those had been the hardest days. Learning to be a mother again when she thought those days were behind her. The morning passed slowly. Sales were decent, but not great. By noon, she'd made about $12. She ate the rice she'd brought from home, drinking water from the bottle she refilled every morning. Her back was hurting again, but she ignored it. In the afternoon, fewer customers came. The heat made people stay home. Mrs. Chen used the quiet time to prepare more bundles for tomorrow, her practiced hands moving steadily despite the pain. She thought about David's school fees. They were due next week. She'd saved most of it, but was still short about $30. Maybe she could stay later this week, catch the evening crowd. People who worked during the day sometimes shopped after 6 o'clock. It meant getting home later, which meant David would worry. But what choice did she have? As the sun started to set, other vendors began packing up. Mrs. Chen kept her stall open, hoping for a few more customers. Her legs ached from standing all day, but she remained. Smiling at anyone who passed by, Mrs. Wang stopped by before leaving. "Go home. Sister Chen, you've been here since dawn." "Just a little longer," Mrs. Chen replied. "Every bit helps." Mrs. Wang sighed and placed some wilted vegetables on her counter. "For your dinner. Please, Sister Chen, you need to eat properly." After everyone left, Mrs. Chen finally packed up her cart. She counted the day's earnings. $15. Better than she'd hoped. She tucked the money carefully into the small pouch she kept hidden under her clothes and began the slow walk home. David would be there, waiting for her. Probably hungry, probably worried because she was late again, but he'd smile when she walked in. And that smile made every aching step worth it because that boy was going to make it. He was going to finish school, go to university, become somebody. She'd make sure of it, even if it took every last bit of strength she had. That was a grandmother's love, quiet, steady, and absolutely unbreakable. And tomorrow, she'd wake up before dawn and do it all again. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything changed. Mrs. Chen was arranging her herb bundles, trying to make them look fuller than they actually were, when she heard running footsteps. She looked up to see David sprinting toward her stall, his school uniform soaked with sweat, his backpack bouncing wildly on his shoulders. Her heart jumped. Something was wrong. He never came to the market during school hours. "Grandma! Grandma!" He was shouting, waving something in his hand. She stood up too quickly and her knees protested. Several other vendors turned to look. David skidded to a stop in front of her stall, breathing so hard he could barely speak. His face was red, his eyes were shining, and his hands were shaking as he held out an envelope. "What is it? What happened?" Mrs. Chen grabbed his shoulders, checking him for injuries. "Are you hurt? Why aren't you in school?" "Grandma, look. Just look." He thrust the envelope at her. Her hands trembled as she took it. The envelope was thick, official-looking, with a government seal on the corner. Her poor eyesight made the words blur together. She held it at arm's length, then closer, squinting hard. "I can't read it properly. Tell me what it says." David took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. "It's from the National Education Board. I've been selected, Grandma. I'm a finalist for the National Merit Scholarship." The words didn't make sense at first. Mrs. Chen stared at her grandson, then at the envelope, then back at him. "Scholarship?" she whispered. "The full scholarship, Grandma. The one I told you about last month, remember? Only 50 students in the entire country get selected from thousands who apply. It covers everything. University fees, books, housing, everything. For 4 years." Mrs. Wang had come over now, along with Mr. Tan and several other vendors. They were all listening, smiling at David's excitement. "But there's more," David continued, his voice getting higher with emotion. "If I'm selected after the final exam, they also give a living allowance. Not just for me, for my family too. For you, Grandma. You wouldn't have to work anymore. You could rest. You could finally rest." Mrs. Chen felt her legs go weak. She sat down heavily on her small stool. The other vendors were congratulating David, patting his shoulder, making excited sounds. But she just sat there holding that envelope, trying to process what this meant. No more waking up at dawn. No more standing for 12 hours. No more worrying about school fees. No more skipping meals. It seemed too good to be true. "There's a final examination," David was explaining now, his words tumbling out fast. "All 50 finalists have to go to the capital city. We'll take a 3-day exam. They'll test everything. Academic knowledge, problem-solving, interviews, everything. The top 20 students will get the scholarship." Mrs. Chen's mind was racing. The capital city. That was 8 hours away by bus. "When?" she asked quietly. David's excitement faltered just a little. 3 weeks from now, we have to be there on the 15th of next month. And how much does it cost to go there? David pulled out another paper from his backpack. This one listed all the requirements: travel expenses, accommodation for 3 nights, exam registration fees, meals. Mrs. Chen read through the numbers slowly, her lips moving silently. Her heart, which had been soaring just moments before, began to sink like a stone in deep water. $500. The total came to $500. She looked up at her grandson's face. He was watching her carefully now, the initial excitement fading as reality set in. He knew, smart boy that he was, he knew what those numbers meant. "It's okay, Grandma," he said quickly. "It's okay. I can try again next year. Or maybe there are other scholarships, smaller ones. It's fine, really." But his voice cracked on the last word, and Mrs. Chen saw him blink rapidly, fighting back tears. The other vendors had gone quiet. They all knew Mrs. Chen's situation. $500 might as well be $5,000. It was impossible. "Let me see that paper again," Mrs. Chen said firmly. She read through every line, every requirement, every deadline. The exam was scheduled for 3 weeks from today. Registration had to be completed 1 week before. That meant 2 weeks to come up with the money, 2 weeks to find $500. That night, after David had gone to sleep, Mrs. Chen sat on the floor of their small room and opened her tin box. This was where she kept everything important. A few photographs of her son and daughter-in-law, David's birth certificate, her husband's old identity card, and at the bottom, wrapped in a cloth, her savings. She counted it 3 times just to be sure. $320. She'd been saving for almost 2 years. Every spare dollar that didn't go to immediate needs went into this tin box. She'd planned to use it for David's university application fees when the time came. She never imagined she'd need so much money so quickly. She was short by $180. Mrs. Chen didn't sleep that night. She lay on her thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, her mind working through possibilities. She could ask to borrow money, but from whom? The other vendors were kind, but they had their own struggles. She could try to sell something, but what? She'd already sold everything of value years ago. There was only one option. She had to earn it. The next morning, Mrs. Chen arrived at the market even earlier than usual. It was still dark, the stars visible overhead. She'd brought twice as many herbs as normal. She'd spent the previous evening preparing bundles by candlelight while David studied, working until her fingers cramped. When the other vendors arrived, they noticed the change immediately. Mrs. Chen's stall was overflowing with herbs. She'd also lowered her prices slightly. "Sister Chen, what are you doing?" Mrs. Wong asked with concern. "You're already selling too cheap." "I need to move more volume," Mrs. Chen replied simply. "I have a goal to meet." She didn't tell them about the scholarship money. She didn't want their pity or their offers of help. This was something she needed to do herself. For the next week, Mrs. Chen worked like never before. She arrived at the market before anyone else and stayed long after everyone had left. She stood through the scorching afternoon heat that usually drove customers away. She smiled until her face hurt, called out to potential customers, explained the benefits of every herb in her collection. Her body screamed in protest. Her back felt like it might break. Her feet swelled so badly she could barely get her shoes on in the morning. Her hands developed new calluses from preparing so many bundles. The other vendors watched with growing worry. "You're going to make yourself sick," Mr. Tan told her one evening. "Whatever you're trying to do, it's not worth your health." But she couldn't stop. Every dollar counted. Every sale brought her closer to the goal. By the end of the first week, she'd earned $60 additional. She was exhausted, but she kept going. She cut her own meals down even further. Plain rice and tea. Nothing else. She needed every cent. David noticed something was wrong. "Grandma, you look tired," he said one night. "Are you feeling okay?" "I'm fine," she lied, forcing a smile. "Just busy at the market. People are buying more herbs these days." He didn't look convinced, but he didn't push. He just made her tea and insisted she drink it while it was hot. By the end of the second week, Mrs. Chen had earned another $70. She was so close now, just $50 more, but she could feel her body giving out. Her cough was getting worse. The pain in her joints was constant now, not just when she moved. She'd lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. 3 days before David's registration deadline, she counted her money again. $450. She was still 50 short. Mrs. Chen sat in the darkness of their room, holding that tin box, feeling despair creep in for the first time. She'd worked herself to the bone, and it still wasn't enough. Her grandson's future, his chance at a better life, was slipping away because she couldn't earn $50 more in time. She put her face in her hands and let herself cry quietly, making sure David couldn't hear. Sometimes love and hard work weren't enough. Sometimes the world asked for more than a person could give. But even as she cried, even as her body ached and her heart broke, she knew she'd be back at that market before dawn. She'd keep trying until the very last moment, because that's what grandmothers did. They never gave up on their children. The next morning, Mrs. Chen was at her stall as usual, despite barely sleeping. Her eyes were red and puffy, but she'd washed her face with cold water and pinned on her usual smile. She arranged her herbs mechanically, her mind still calculating and recalculating. $50, just $50 more. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the woman approaching until she was standing right in front of the stall. "Good morning, Auntie." Mrs. Chen looked up. The woman was middle-aged, maybe in her 50s, dressed simply in a plain cotton dress and comfortable shoes. Nothing fancy, but clean and neat. She wore no jewelry except for a simple watch. Her face was kind, with smile lines around her eyes. "Good morning," Mrs. Chen replied, straightening up. "What can I get for you today?" The woman studied the herbs carefully, picking up different bundles, smelling them, examining the leaves closely. "You have good quality here," she said. "These are fresh." "Picked this morning?" "Yesterday evening," Mrs. Chen admitted. "I picked them myself from a small garden plot on the outskirts of the city. Early morning or late evening when they're at their best." The woman's eyebrows raised slightly. "You pick them yourself? At your age?" Mrs. Chen shrugged. "Someone has to do it, and I know which plants are which. My grandmother taught me long ago." The woman selected several bundles, basil, cilantro, and some medicinal herbs that most customers didn't even recognize. "These herbs here," the woman pointed to the medicinal ones. "What are they for?" Mrs. Chen's face brightened slightly. This was something she knew well. "This one helps with digestion. You make it into tea. This one is good for headaches. And this one?" She picked up a particular bundle gently. "This helps people sleep better, especially good for people who worry too much and can't rest their minds." "How do you know all this?" "My grandmother was a healer in our village. Not a doctor, but people came to her when they were sick. She knew plants, knew what helped with what. She taught me everything before she passed." The woman listened intently, asking more questions. "What about this plant? How do you prepare that one? Are these safe for children?" Mrs. Chen answered each question patiently, thoroughly, sharing knowledge she'd carried for decades. When they finished talking, the woman paid for her herbs. But then she did something unusual. She gave Mrs. Chen $20 for items that cost only $12. "Keep the change," the woman said when Mrs. Chen tried to give the money back. No, I can't do that. It's too much, please. Your knowledge is worth more than the herbs themselves. Thank you for sharing it with me." Before Mrs. Chen could protest further, the woman walked away, disappearing into the morning crowd. Mrs. Wong had watched the entire exchange. "Strange one that," she commented, "but generous. You should be happy." Mrs. Chen was happy. $8 extra. It wasn't much, but it was something. 42 more to go. The next day, the same woman came back, and the day after that. Each time she bought herbs, asked questions about their uses, and paid more than necessary. She was always polite, always interested, always insisting Mrs. Chen keep the change. "You come here every day now," Mrs. Chen finally said on the 5th visit. "Do you use so many herbs?" The woman smiled. "I'm doing some research. Traditional medicine, herbal remedies. I'm trying to understand what works and why. You have so much knowledge, Auntie. It would be a shame for it to be lost." "Research? Are you a doctor?" "Something like that," the woman replied vaguely. "I work in medicine, but I believe we've forgotten a lot of useful things our ancestors knew. I'm trying to learn them again." Mrs. Chen felt oddly comfortable with this woman. Maybe it was her gentle way of asking questions. Maybe it was how she actually listened to the answers, writing notes in a small book she carried. Or maybe it was just that Mrs. Chen was so tired and worried that having someone genuinely interested in what she knew felt like a small comfort. On the 7th day, the woman arrived with a proposal. "Auntie, I'd like to hire you as a consultant for my research project." Mrs. Chen laughed, thinking it was a joke. Consultant? Me? I don't even know what that word really means. It means I pay you to share your knowledge. I have funding for my research. I need to interview people like you who understand traditional herbs and remedies. I'll pay you for your time and expertise. But I have no education. I never went to university. I just know what my grandmother taught me. The woman leaned forward slightly. That's exactly the kind of knowledge I need. Real knowledge passed down through generations. The kind you can't learn from books. How much time would this take? Just what you're already doing. When I come to buy herbs, we talk. You tell me what you know. I write it down. Maybe a few hours a week for the next month or two. And you would pay me for this? Yes, I'd pay you for your expertise. Let's say $200 to start. For the first month of consultation. If the project continues, we can discuss more. Mrs. Chen felt dizzy. $200. Just for talking about herbs? It seemed impossible. Too good to be true. Are you sure? She asked quietly. This isn't charity? The woman looked slightly offended. It's not charity at all. It's payment for valuable work. Your knowledge is a resource. I'm simply paying for access to it, the same way I'd pay any other expert consultant. Mrs. Chen's hands were shaking. $200. Added to what she'd already saved, it would be more than enough for David's trip. More than enough for the exam fees. There might even be money left over. I don't know what to say. Say yes, the woman smiled. Unless you're not interested. No, I mean yes. Yes, I'm interested. Thank you. Thank you so much. They agreed on the terms right there. The woman said she'd return the next day with a simple contract and the first payment. Mrs. Chen could barely contain herself. After the woman left, she sat down on her stool, her hands pressed to her chest, feeling her heart racing. Mrs. Wang came over immediately. What was all that about? Mrs. Chen explained, her words tumbling out in excitement. That's wonderful news, Mrs. Wang exclaimed. See? Good things come to good people. That night, Mrs. Chen couldn't stop smiling. She cooked a proper meal for the first time in weeks. Rice with vegetables and even a little bit of chicken. David noticed immediately. Grandma, why are we celebrating? Because life is good, she said simply. And because you're going to that exam. What? How did you? Don't worry about how. Just know that it's taken care of. You focus on studying. I'll handle the rest. David looked at her suspiciously. Grandma, what did you do? You didn't borrow money, did you? Or sell something? Nothing like that. I got a job. A second job. Someone wants to pay me to talk about herbs. She explained about the woman and the research project. David listened, his expression shifting from confusion to amazement to joy. This is incredible, he whispered. I can really go? You can really go. He hugged her then, tight and long, and Mrs. Chen felt tears running down her face. Happy tears this time. Relief tears. The next day, the woman returned as promised. She brought a simple one-page contract written in clear language that even Mrs. Chen could understand. And she brought an envelope with $200 in cash. I need you to count it, the woman said. Make sure it's all there. Mrs. Chen counted with trembling fingers. All $200 in clean bills. This is really happening, she whispered. It really is. You've earned this, Auntie. Your knowledge is valuable. Never forget that. After the woman left, Mrs. Chen held that envelope like it was made of gold. She'd done it. Against all odds, working herself nearly to death, she'd done it. David would go to the capital. He'd take that exam. He'd have his chance. That evening, she went to the school office with David and paid the registration fee. The clerk gave them a receipt and an information packet about the exam schedule, the accommodation arrangements, and what David needed to bring. Good luck, the clerk said. The competition is tough, but if you made it to the finals, you must be quite bright. David beamed with pride. Mrs. Chen squeezed his hand. Walking home, David was chattering excitedly about the exam, about what he needed to study, about his chances. Mrs. Chen listened, her heart full, her body exhausted but her spirit soaring. She'd given her grandson a chance. That's all any grandmother could hope to do. She didn't know it then, but the woman in the plain cotton dress was about to change both their lives in ways Mrs. Chen couldn't possibly imagine. Sometimes miracles didn't come from heaven. Sometimes they came from kind strangers who saw value where others saw only an old woman selling herbs. 3 months had passed since David left for the capital. 3 months of waiting, hoping, and praying. Mrs. Chen kept herself busy at the market, but every day felt longer than the last. The woman who'd hired her as a consultant still came by regularly, and their conversations had become something Mrs. Chen looked forward to. It felt good to be valued for what she knew. Then one Tuesday morning, the mail carrier stopped at her stall with a letter. An official-looking envelope with a government seal. Mrs. Chen's hands shook so badly that Mrs. Wong had to open it for her. "What does it say?" Mrs. Chen whispered, afraid to hope. Mrs. Wong's eyes scanned the letter, and then her face broke into a huge smile. He got it. David got the scholarship. He's one of the 20 selected students. Mrs. Chen felt her legs give out. She sat down hard on her stool, the letter clutched in her hands, tears streaming down her face. The other vendors gathered around, reading over her shoulder, congratulating her, patting her back. She couldn't speak. She could only cry. But the letter said something else too, something she didn't understand at first. Mrs. Chen and her grandson were invited to a special ceremony at the presidential palace next month. All scholarship recipients and their families would be honored in a formal event with government officials. Presidential palace? Mrs. Chen looked up in confusion. Why would they want me there? It's an honor, Mr. Tan explained. They're recognizing the families too, acknowledging the sacrifices made. You should be proud, yes, but also terrified. Mrs. Chen had never been anywhere fancy in her entire life. She didn't own nice clothes. She didn't know how to behave at formal events. The thought of going to the palace made her more nervous than happy, but David was coming home for the ceremony, and that's all that mattered. 2 weeks later, when David returned, he looked different. Taller somehow, more confident. University life was changing him already. He hugged his grandmother tight, lifting her off her feet slightly, and she laughed through her tears. I'm so proud of you, she kept saying. So proud. They spent the evening talking. David told her about his classes, his roommates, the massive library, the professors. His eyes shone with excitement about everything he was learning. Mrs. Chen listened, understanding maybe half of what he said but loving every word. Then David brought up the ceremony. Grandma, we need to get you something nice to wear. Something suitable for the palace. Mrs. Chen waved her hand dismissively. I have my good dress. The blue one. I'll wear that. Grandma, that dress is 20 years old. Please let me buy you something new. You shouldn't spend money on such things. I got a small allowance with the scholarship. I can afford it, please. They argued about it, but eventually Mrs. Chen agreed. The next day they went to a modest clothing store, and David helped her pick out a simple but elegant dress. Nothing too fancy, but new and proper. Mrs. Chen kept looking at the price tag and wincing, but David insisted. You deserve this, he said firmly. After everything you've done for me? This is nothing. The day of the ceremony arrived. Mrs. Chen woke up before dawn, too nervous to sleep. She bathed carefully, put on her new dress, and let David help her with her hair. She looked at herself in the small, cracked mirror in their room and barely recognized the reflection. You look beautiful, Grandma, David said softly. They took a bus to the Palace District, arriving an hour early because Mrs. Chen was terrified of being late. Security guards checked their invitation letter and directed them to a waiting area. Mrs. Chen had never seen such grandeur. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, paintings on the walls that probably cost more than she'd earn in 10 lifetimes. Other scholarship recipients and their families were arriving too. Most looked more comfortable in this setting than Mrs. Chen felt. She kept her head down, holding David's arm tightly. Then she heard a familiar voice. Auntie, you came. Mrs. Chen looked up to see the woman from the market. But she looked different today. She wore an elegant suit. Her hair was styled professionally, and she carried herself with an air of authority that hadn't been as obvious before. Several people seemed to defer to her as she walked through the hall. Of course I came, Mrs. Chen said, confused. My grandson received the scholarship. But what are you doing here? The woman smiled mysteriously. I work here sometimes. Come, let me show you to your seats. She led them into a magnificent hall where rows of chairs faced a raised platform. Mrs. Chen and David were seated in the third row, much closer to the front than Mrs. Chen expected. As more people filed in, she noticed how everyone seemed to recognize and respect the woman who'd brought them in. Grandma, David whispered, I think that lady might be someone important. Before Mrs. Chen could respond, music started playing. Everyone stood as officials entered the hall. And then the president himself walked in, waving to the audience. Mrs. Chen's heart pounded. She'd only ever seen the president on television. The ceremony began with speeches about education, opportunity, and the importance of nurturing young talent. Each scholarship recipient was called up to receive a certificate and shake hands with the president. When David's name was called, Mrs. Chen's eyes filled with tears again. Her grandson, shaking hands with the president. Who would have believed it? After all the students had been honored, the president made another announcement. Today, we're also launching a new national initiative. For too long, we've watched traditional knowledge disappear as older generations pass away. The knowledge of medicinal plants, traditional healing practices, and ancient wisdom that has served our people for centuries is being lost. Mrs. Chen listened politely, not understanding why this was being mentioned at a scholarship ceremony. Thanks to the work of Dr. Patel, my chief advisor on traditional medicine and public health, we've been conducting research into these traditional practices, and we've found treasures, people with incredible knowledge like the woman I'd like to invite to the stage right now. Mrs. Chen, would you please come up? Mrs. Chen froze. Did he just say her name? That couldn't be right. She must have misheard. But everyone was turning to look at her. David was staring at her in shock. The woman from the market, Dr. Patel, was walking toward her with an encouraging smile. Come, Auntie. The president wants to meet you. Me? Why? There must be a mistake. No mistake. Come. In a daze, Mrs. Chen let herself be led to the stage. Her legs felt like water. The president himself stepped forward to shake her hand, and she nearly fainted. Mrs. Chen, the president said warmly, Dr. Patel has told me about your extensive knowledge of medicinal herbs and traditional healing practices. Knowledge passed down through generations. Knowledge that is invaluable to our nation's heritage. Mrs. Chen could only nod, unable to find words. For the past 3 months, Dr. Patel has been documenting your knowledge as part of our Traditional Medicine Heritage Project. Your expertise, your wisdom represents exactly what we're trying to preserve. Mrs. Chen glanced at Dr. Patel, who smiled and nodded. You thought I was just a researcher? Dr. Patel said quietly. I am. But I'm also the president's sister and his chief medical advisor. I visit markets and villages in plain clothes because I want people to speak to me honestly, not because of my position. Mrs. Chen felt the room spinning. The kind woman who'd been buying her herbs for months was the president's sister? The president continued speaking. We're establishing the National Traditional Medicine Heritage Center. It will document, preserve, and teach traditional healing knowledge. And Mrs. Chen, we'd like you to be the honorary director and head consultant of this center. The audience applauded. Mrs. Chen stood there, completely overwhelmed. The position comes with a government salary, the president explained. A pension for your retirement and housing near the center, which will be established at Riverside Market where you currently work. Mrs. Chen finally found her voice. I don't understand. I'm just an old woman who sells herbs. You're a keeper of knowledge, Dr. Patel said gently. You're a link to our past and a bridge to our future. You're exactly who we need. David had come up to the stage now, tears running down his face, standing beside his grandmother. The president shook his hand too. Your grandmother sacrificed everything for your education. Now we want to honor that sacrifice and recognize her own value. She won't have to stand in the market anymore unless she wants to. Mrs. Chen looked at David, at Dr. Patel, at the president, at the audience full of people applauding. Her whole life she'd thought she was nobody. Just a poor old woman with no education, nothing to offer except hard work and love for her grandson. But apparently she'd been wrong. The knowledge her grandmother had given her, the wisdom she'd carried for decades without thinking it was special, turned out to be precious. Worth preserving. Worth honoring. She thought about all those mornings arriving at the market before dawn, all those hours standing until her feet ached, all those nights eating plain rice so David could have better meals. All of it had led to this impossible moment. I accept, she whispered. Then louder, I accept. And I'll do my best. The applause grew louder. David hugged her right there on stage and she held him tight. This boy she'd raised, this young man who'd made her proud. Sometimes, she thought, life surprised you. Sometimes the universe gave back more than you'd ever dared to hope for. 6 months had passed since that incredible day at the presidential palace. Mrs. Chen still sometimes woke up thinking it had all been a dream. But then she'd look around her new bedroom. In the small but comfortable house the government had provided just 2 blocks from Riverside Market. And she'd know it was real. She still went to the market every day. Not because she had to anymore, but because she wanted to. The other vendors were her family. Mrs. Wong, Mr. Tan, and all the others who'd supported her through the hard years. She couldn't just abandon them, but now things were different. Now she arrived at a reasonable hour, not before dawn. She didn't have to stand for 12 hours anymore. And she didn't sell herbs to survive. She shared knowledge instead. The Traditional Medicine Heritage Center was being built at the edge of the market. Construction had started last month. Mrs. Chen walked past it every day, watching the walls go up, seeing her impossible future taking physical shape. Dr. Patel visited regularly, sometimes in her official capacity, sometimes just as a friend. They developed a genuine bond over the months. Today she arrived at Mrs. Chen's stall with news. "The center will be ready next month," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "And we've already received applications from 47 young people who want to learn traditional medicine from you." Mrs. Chen felt a flutter of nervousness. 47? That's so many. I don't know if I can teach that many people. You won't be alone. We're bringing in other traditional healers from around the country too, but you'll be leading the program. Your knowledge will be the foundation. I still can't believe this is happening. Believe it, Dr. Patel smiled. You've earned every bit of this. David came home from university that weekend. He'd grown even more confident, more sure of himself. But he was still the same caring grandson who worried about his grandmother. "Are you happy, Grandma?" he asked as they ate dinner together in her new house. "Happy? I'm more than happy. I'm grateful. Blessed. I don't even have words for it. You deserve it. Everything you sacrificed for me, everything you went through." Mrs. Chen reached across the table and took his hand. "I never thought of it as sacrifice. You were my purpose. You gave me reason to wake up every morning. And now I have a new purpose. Sharing what I know, making sure it doesn't die with me." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then David said something that surprised her. "I've been thinking about changing my major." "What? Why? You love biochemistry." "I do, but I've been learning about ethnobotany, the science of how different cultures use plants. Grandma, what you know, what other traditional healers know. Scientists are just starting to understand how valuable it is. Some of our modern medicines come from traditional plant knowledge." Mrs. Chen listened, not entirely understanding all the technical terms but grasping the basic idea. "I want to bridge both worlds," David continued. "Traditional knowledge and modern science. I could help document and study what you and others teach. Help prove scientifically what you've known all along. Is this really what you want? Or are you doing it because of me?" "It's what I want. You showed me that old wisdom has value. I want to be part of preserving and understanding it." Mrs. Chen felt tears prick her eyes. Her grandson inspired by her. Who would have imagined? The day the Heritage Center opened was declared a local holiday in Riverside Market. Everyone came out to celebrate. Banners hung between stalls. The mayor gave a speech. Television cameras recorded everything. But the moment that mattered most to Mrs. Chen was when the motorcade arrived. She'd been standing with the other vendors, laughing at something Mrs. Wong said, when someone shouted, "They're coming!" Black cars with government flags rolled slowly into the market square. Police motorcycles led the way, their lights flashing. The crowd parted, people craning their necks to see. Mrs. Chen felt that same nervousness she'd felt at the palace, her heart beating fast. The president stepped out of the lead vehicle with Dr. Patel right behind him. But this time Mrs. Chen didn't feel quite as overwhelmed. She'd met him before. She knew what to expect. He walked straight to her, extending his hand with a warm smile. "Mrs. Chen, are you ready to make history?" "As ready as I'll ever be, sir." Together they walked to the entrance of the new center. The building wasn't huge or fancy, but it was beautiful in its simplicity. Large windows let in natural light. Inside there were classrooms, a library, a garden area for growing medicinal plants, and a laboratory where traditional remedies could be tested scientifically. The president handed Mrs. Chen a golden key. "The honor is yours," he said. With shaking hands, Mrs. Chen unlocked the door. It swung open and everyone applauded. Cameras flashed. People cheered. Mrs. Wong was crying openly. Mr. Tan was grinning like a fool. They toured the facility together. The president asked questions. Mrs. Chen explained how different spaces would be used. She showed him the garden area where students would learn to identify plants, the classroom where she'd share stories passed down through generations, the laboratory where David and other scientists would study traditional remedies. In the main hall, there was a wall dedicated to traditional healers from across the country. Photos and brief biographies of men and women who'd kept ancient knowledge alive. And there, right in the center, was a large photo of Mrs. Chen at her herb stall, taken months ago by Dr. Patel. Mrs. Chen stared at it, overwhelmed. That tired old woman in the photo was her, but she also wasn't. That woman had thought she was nobody. This woman knew different. After the official ceremony ended and the president left, the market threw their own celebration. Someone brought out a radio. Music played. People danced. Food appeared from everywhere. Vendors sharing their best dishes. It felt like a wedding or a festival. Mrs. Chen sat on a bench watching it all, feeling a deep contentment she'd never experienced before. David sat beside her and she leaned against his shoulder. "Your parents would be so proud of you," she said quietly. "They'd be proud of both of us." As the sun began to set, painting the sky orange and pink, Mrs. Chen looked around at her market family, at the new center, at her grandson beside her. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The early mornings, the aching back, the hungry nights, the constant worry. Every bit of struggle had led to this. She thought about the other grandmothers out there, the ones still struggling, still sacrificing, still working themselves to the bone for the children they loved. She hoped her story might give them hope. Not that motorcades and presidents would come for them, but that their love and sacrifice mattered. That it would be worth it in the end. 3 months later, the Heritage Center held its first graduation ceremony. 23 students had completed the initial training program. They'd learned to identify over 100 medicinal plants, understand their uses, and prepare traditional remedies. More importantly, they'd learned to respect the old knowledge, to see it as valuable rather than outdated. Mrs. Chen stood before them. These young people who called her teacher, who listened to her stories, who wrote down every word she said about plants and healing. "My grandmother once told me," she said to them, "that knowledge is like water. It must flow from one generation to the next or it dries up and disappears. You are that flow now. You carry this knowledge forward." She paused, looking at their eager young faces. "But remember something else. Knowledge alone isn't enough. The herbs I taught you about, they work because they're used with care, with love, with intention to heal. Never forget the human part. The compassion, the desire to help others. That's what makes a true healer." After the ceremony, David approached her with a thick folder. "Grandma, look at this. It's my research paper. I studied 20 of the traditional remedies you taught me. Tested them in the lab. 15 of them showed measurable medicinal properties. We're going to publish this in a scientific journal." Mrs. Chen smiled, not fully understanding but feeling proud nonetheless. Her knowledge, passed down from her grandmother, was being proven true by science. The old and new working together. That night, lying in her comfortable bed in her little house, Mrs. Chen thought about how far she'd come. From that desperate morning counting her meager savings to this, from feeling like a failure because she couldn't earn enough money fast enough, to being honored by her country. Life had a strange way of working out. She thought about all the grandmothers and grandfathers out there, the ones who sacrificed everything for their children and grandchildren, the ones who felt invisible and unimportant. She hoped somehow they'd know that they mattered, that their love and their knowledge and their sacrifice meant something, because it did. It always did. Mrs. Chen closed her eyes, a smile on her lips, and fell into a peaceful sleep. Outside, the market was quiet, resting before another busy day. But the Heritage Center stood tall, its windows reflecting the moonlight, a promise that the old wisdom would not be forgotten. And somewhere in the city, a young university student sat at his desk writing about traditional medicine, carrying forward the knowledge his grandmother had given him, building bridges between past and future. The herb seller's legacy would live on, not just in buildings and programs, but in every person she'd touched, every student she'd taught, every life she'd changed simply by being who she was. Grandmother who loved her grandson enough to sell. Herbs before dawn, a teacher who shared her wisdom freely, a keeper of knowledge who ensured the old ways wouldn't die. That was worth more than all the motorcades and ceremonies in the world. That was everything.